This is episode 22 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. My guest is Steve Rozenberg. Steve, welcome to the show. Great to meet you finally.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to read your bio in and then we'll get into it. Steve chose real estate investing to be able to control his own destiny and create his own generational wealth, which is one of my favorite terms ever. He created the fastest growing property management company in the state of Texas, managing over 1,000 properties across 3 major metro cities. He has grown his property management company and flipped, owned, and wholesaled hundreds of single family homes and apartment complexes across the United States. Quite a background. It hasn't been as long as people think. How long have you actually been in real estate investing?
Well, I started in 2001, so it's been 21 years. It feels like dog years, so you think that'd maybe be like 140, but yeah, it's been about 21 so far.
And how did you get started in? What was your first into real estate investing? Like, was it something as a kid that you ever thought of growing up, or did you fall into it?
Never thought of it, never wanted to do it, was never on my radar, we'll say. The way that it transpired for me is, growing up, I only wanted to do one thing, as a little kid. That was be an airline pilot. It's all I ever wanted to do. And at 25 years old, I got hired with the major airline. I was the second youngest person hired, with this particular airline. So I would have retired number 2 in airline seniority. And I had the best job in the world. I was flying all over. I was flying all over the planet, really. And it was the most safe, secure job that one could think of when you're flying for an airline and you're in a union and all that.
Especially at 25, right? I mean, you start at 25 and you have the security and doing what you love. That's like ideal.
Yeah. And everyone tells you, man, you made it. You're good. You don't have to do anything. You're going to retire a millionaire. You're an airline pilot, best job in the world. And that was true, until 9/11. And 9/11 was obviously a tragic day in our history. But for me, 2 days after, the towers fell, that was kind of my coming to reckoning day, because that's the day that I got delivered a furlough notice. And basically I was told that, hey, Steve, you're a good employee, but that safe and that secure job that you thought you had, it was never safe and it was never secure. And you're about to be on the street with 50,000 other pilots. So good luck.
Is that how many pilots got laid off then? 50,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. From all the airlines.
Yeah.
And, not only are we dealing with, reeling in from the 9/11 tragedies and death and everything, but now something that I wasn't a part of, I had nothing to do with, but now I'm affected because of it. And not only am I affected, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills because of it.
Right. And that was your thing. That was the only thing that you wanted to do. So you had to make a pivot to something.
Yeah. And so you realize, when you're so specialized in a job, or career, whatever you want to call it, when that doesn't exist, you're useless to the rest of the world. And it's very humbling. And you realize, like, wow, I can fly a plane, but there has to be a plane for me to fly. And,
right.
That was not going to, no one knew. So I started thinking, okay, what could I do? And I started learning and reading. And the way airlines work is they say, okay, there's 1,200 guys on the chopping block. We're going to start and we're going to keep cutting 100 a month until we get to either profitability or we get to your number.
Right.
So every month they're cutting people. So it wasn't like I was out of a job that day. It was coming.
Do you have any idea like where you are in that chopping block line, like how close they're getting to you, or?
Yeah, I was towards the end of the chopping block. But if there was another tragedy, if there was another anything hiccup,
yeah,
they would have just said, we're cutting everyone tomorrow. And that's all they had to do. So what I started doing is I started thinking, okay, what do people do that are successful? I started reading, watching everything, and everybody that I saw that was wealthy was somehow tied to real estate. I didn't know how, didn't know why, but even people like Arnold Schwarzenegger was a multimillionaire from real estate before he ever won his first bodybuilding competition.
Yep.
And I was just like, well, it was so weird to me because, you live in this bubble and you think, oh, people make money working at jobs. But then I started learning about real estate, which I didn't know anything about. I was 28 at that point, 28 and a half, about to be 29. And I realized, okay, well, this makes sense. I did know some people that did real estate as pilots. Made sense. So there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, there was no what we have now today.
Yeah.
So I had to go to that building with books called the library.
Oh, the library.
Yes. And I had to get a library card, and I had to check out books, and I read a book a week. Every single week I read a book on real estate, and I was fanatical. Like I was on a driven mission to figure this out.
Do you remember what the first book that you read was? It's usually Rich Dad Poor Dad, but like sometimes
I think it was one of those Rich Dad Poor Dads that somebody said, here, you should read this.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was, which we all know is life-changing for many, many people.
Yeah.
And it just got me on the whole idea and the mindset. And again, I just started reading everything I could. And then I thought, okay, I've got to take some action. I've got to do something. And so I paid for a mentor to mentor me on how to flip and do double closes, not flip, how to wholesale and do double closes. I didn't even know what the word meant, but I paid the guy $10,000, and he said, listen, if you do what I say, this will work. If you don't do what I say, it won't work. And I'm like, well, why? I just paid you $10,000. Why would I not do what you say? He said, I'm just telling you what happens. And if you do what I say, it will work. I'm like, okay, I heard you the first time, but I get it.
Yeah.
So 30 days later, I am in a title company doing a double close, flipping, doing a property. And I'm like, I don't even know the words. He's on the phone, and I'm like, they're asking me questions. I'm like, I think you need to talk to him. And literally I did the deal, right? So I flipped this property in a double escrow close.
Yeah.
And I walk out with a check for $20,000. And the deal is he got 50% of the deal if he walked me through it, which he did.
Yeah.
And I was like, I walked out of I probably was the most confused person walking out of the title company, because I'm like, I don't even know what I just did, but I have $20,000 in my hand. And basically, I got my money back. He got his money. And I told him, I said, man, why can't I do this all the time? And he's like, Steve, you can. And I said, but I don't understand. Why don't other people do it? And he said, man, let me know when you figure that out, because he goes, you're one of the few people that do this.
Well, you do what he said to do. You just did it, right?
Exactly what he said. I didn't question it. I didn't say that doesn't work. I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I paid this guy. I'm just going to do what he said. That was, to me, it was just common sense. But apparently, we all know that that's not the norm. And so he's like, dude, if you just keep doing what you're doing, you will be very successful. That's all I needed to hear.
It's interesting because so many people pay for mentorships and don't succeed, and you were unwilling to do that. But he was telling you, listen, you'd be surprised, because I think it's exactly what you said. I think people try to insert their own part into it too early. Like once you know how to do it, then you can put your spin on it and grow from it. But like if you do it wrong from the beginning, nothing's going to happen, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because he told me, he said, Steve, he goes, I would rather take someone like you that knows nothing about real estate, and you have no preconceived notions. Yeah. You don't have this crap in your head. He goes, just do what I say and don't question it. And I'm like, okay. I've got nothing to lose. I've already given you my $10,000, and it worked. And I went on and I built a pretty successful business wholesaling and flipping properties. And I learned how to master communication. And I learned how to be a master negotiator, because I realized the wealthiest people on the planet are the ones that know how to negotiate and the ones that know how to communicate with people. Yeah. So I'm not very good with a hammer. I'm horrible, as a matter of fact. So
same.
It took me 3 days to change my oil one day in my car, and it's like, just take it to this is not working. And so I tell people I make my money from the neck up. That's what I do. So I got really good. I did so well that I made enough money, and I bought an apartment complex with another person in Houston, Texas.
Well, so was the apartment building like your first investment straight out, other than wholesales? Yeah. Okay.
No, you know what? I think I actually bought 1 or 2 rentals, because I had a couple deals. They were great deals. They fell out, and I was like, shit, I should just buy this.
Yeah,
it's a slamming deal. So I had a couple. Yeah, I did have a couple. What's interesting though is the guy who I went in partnership on the apartment complex, who later became my business partner, he wanted to know what I did. He's like, Steve, I want to see how are you making $20,000, $30,000 every time you flip $100,000 house? And I'm like, I could show you. He's like, yeah. And I said, but I want to learn what you know. I want to learn how to own an apartment building. He's like, it's not as fun as what you're doing. I'm like, but my thing is that's a job. What I was doing was a job. I had to work. yes, I did very well financially, but it was not passive income. And we all know owning real estate is not really passive, but
not at all.
Yeah, but I thought like, dude, if I stop working, that hamster wheel, as soon as that stops, everything stops.
Yeah.
And so I showed him how to flip. He and I started flipping properties. We had the apartment complex. We sold the apartment complex. We had all this money because we made a pretty good deal. And then we started buying some single family houses while the economy was crashing. Economy's crashing. We went in and started buying stuff.
Are you buying in Texas at the time?
Buying in Texas, in Houston. But the mistake was for us and our business model, we bought the wrong properties. We bought the wrong kinds of properties. So we bought low income, high cash flow properties. The high cash flow never came realized, but the low income was. And we had about 30 or 40 of these houses. And then we realized why people don't own these properties. And, our vacancy was through the roof. Our expenses were high. And what happened is we tried to hand them over to a management company and nobody wanted them. They're like, we don't want those.
Yeah.
So it was after the recession. We could not, we couldn't sell them. So we decided the next best thing is to manage them ourselves. So we went to a business coach, knew nothing about real estate, but he knew how to run businesses. And we said, here's what we have. Here's what we did. We showed him everything. And he said, you guys have a business, but you two are not the smartest guys on earth. And you will be bankrupt in 6 months if you don't know what. So we hire him. Now we have a business coach. We don't know what we're doing. We stayed with that guy for 7 years. Every single week we went in and just got our butts kicked by this coach. We learned all about cost of goods sold, acquisition costs. We learned business. And we took that and we scaled it to 1,000 properties.
Wow.
We had 60% of our company running with virtual assistants out of Mexico. I was speaking all over the United States and Australia because we built it the way airlines run. We built it with the systemization, structures, and procedures. If you look at an airline, I mean, I don't care if your bag gets lost, but if you look at an airline, it's one of the most perfect systems in the world as far as business goes. So I was like, okay, I've been trained by Boeing for the last 20 years. Why don't we just take what I've learned in the airlines and inject this into a business? And that's how we grew it. We scaled it. We grew it so fast. Everybody was like, all the other property management companies in the industry were like, how are you guys doing this? And we said, well, we don't look at this as property management. This is a business. We just happen to run a management inside of it. But the shell is a business, is a business, is a business.
Yeah.
And that's why we eventually sold to a venture capital firm and I became a vice president with them. And then I have bigger pockets and all the other stuff I've done. But it's because we took a different tact. We did it as business owners, not as quote unquote real estate investors or property managers. It was just a business. And so that's what I teach people today is how to do it as a business, to identify yourself as a business owner, not a real estate flipper, whatever the new term is these days.
Yeah, I know there's lots of, I wanted to drop back on one thing you said, because I think it was really interesting. And I think the listeners will get a lot out of it. You said high cash flow properties in quotes, and you and I both know that they're high cash flow for a reason. It's because no repairs have ever been done. That's why they're marketed with so much cash flow. But very quickly you found out that those properties require the most. And like you said, always have the most vacancy, right?
Yeah, they were tough because we were trying to run it as a hands-off model, and those are not hands-off properties. And so that was our challenge. I'll never forget. We had a property that we sold. It was like a $50,000, $60,000 property, just to put it into perspective. We sold this property, had to come to the closing table with cash. We had to bring cash to the table because we just wanted to get rid of it. Now, the guy buying it was the happiest guy because he was selling it, because he was getting a deal. We were more happy because it wasn't our problem anymore. Yeah. And I thought to myself, this guy's going to lose his ass on this property. Like, he's going to get smoked. I see him like 2 years later at a real estate event, and we told him, look, man, this is a tough property. He's like, I got it. We're like, okay, expert, you got it. 2 years later, I see him at this real estate event. I said, man, how's that property doing? Thinking he's going to, bleed on, cry to me. He's like, oh man, that's my best money producing property. I'm like, the one I sold you? I'm like, the one, my property. He's like, yeah. He's like, that's a great deal. I said, there's no way. He goes, Steve, let me explain something. That's 4 walls and a roof. You had the wrong business model running inside those 4 walls and a roof. you could take any property and you could lose everything, or you can make money depending on the business model that you inject in there. And that was like a light bulb in my head. And I thought, how many properties have I driven by that I said, oh, that's not going to work? I just thought of it. I looked at it through the lens of one business model, not maybe a short-term rental or whatever the fancy terms are. But it really made me realize, okay, I wasn't being a good business person, because I was looking at everything as a nail and a hammer, not a broom or a rake or a paintbrush.
Right. That would all together make one diversified portfolio that is honestly, it's more fun that way for me. I always like different assets, because then
absolutely
I'm not bored. I feel like some investors get too pigeonholed on themselves, thinking like, well, I'm just going to be a flipper, but then when you're a flipper and you're good at marketing, you end up with a bunch of properties that you probably should wholesale because you have overage, and they lose money on the overage from not figuring out how to wholesale. They're just like, oh, I can't take all those deals. Great. Sell them to somebody.
Well, I think one of the challenges most people have, along to the point that you said, especially newer investors, is they want to identify as something. I am a flipper. I am a wholesaler.
Yeah.
These are just strategies to get you to the goal. That's like saying, okay, I want to go to Disneyland and I'm going to use the 405 freeway in Los Angeles. So I'm a freeway. I'm the 405.
Right.
This is just a means to get you to the goal. My bigger question is what's the goal? What does this give you? What is this property going to give you? And how do you make it a numerical, tangible thing that you can actually say, this will give me $20,000 and, with a 15% yield margin or whatever, however you want to quantify it. But to say that I'm a flipper, then to you, everything has to be a flip.
Right.
And if somebody comes with subject to or a wrap or anything else, oh, that's not me. I don't see that, because that's not in your filter. Everything's a flip, like you said. And how many deals, millions of dollars, do they lose because they have that tunnel vision? Now, I think there's something to be said about being focused and being intentional. But I don't think that, I think like as well as you, I'm sure, is I've done so many different types of deals that I could look at a deal and go, you know what, that's a good subject to, or that's a wrap, whatever the case may be. I'll own or finance that property because I've done them all. I made sure I mastered each one of them, but now it's muscle memory.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're focused on building a business, then you can bring in other things and try out, see if that funnel works and adjust the funnel. But I think you're right. I think a lot of investors, as they try to start to scale, they're not thinking business first. And then the money is just everywhere. They just can't keep it together. And I find that, like, when you were flipping, did you have that issue with, like, contractors? We've always had an issue with, they're just so hard to deal with because they're generally not great at business. So then it slows down our process and we can't run our business on their business.
It's funny is as I got more educated as a business owner, and yes, I always had that challenge. And I realized I started coaching these guys merely for self-preservation because I didn't want them to go out of business. Yeah. So I had to show them how to create systems because selfishly we needed them to survive. And so we were telling them, well, this is how you got to do your client base, and this is how you should charge, and this is how you get, and we're telling them, like, you're too cheap. This is why you don't have any money, is you're not charging enough, which would screw us, but in a way, but we're trying to bring them up so that they have a tangible business that succeeds. I don't want to be selfish. I want them to succeed because their success is my success.
Yeah. So now, moving forward to this day, you sold that company to venture capital. Now you're doing a lot of coaching and speaking. What do you do with masterminds and coaching now that can really help investors learn the right way? I mean, I created this podcast for, like, a mindful approach. And when I went through your stuff, I was like, oh, this guy gets it. Because I feel like there's so many things out there that are really, like, selling. But like you said in the beginning, you paid $10,000 for that program and you did it and it worked. So there's options to make things work for people, but they really have to be kind of coached into doing it themselves. What are you doing now that's really out there to help all these investors?
I do a couple things. Number one, I have a full educational course, a video course on, there's a gentleman out there named Brad Lee. And my education course is on his platform. People like, Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, all of our stuff is on Brad's platform. And it's a video course. And that course in of itself is the mental side of being an investor. The person you are when you buy one property, the first property you buy, you have thoughts that go through your mind. You have fear, you have doubt. You're probably doing a lot of things. When you go from 1 to 5, you have a different set of challenges. You're becoming a different person if you're going to be successful. Then when you go from 5 to 10, 10 to 20 syndications, you are on a journey, and that journey is evolving and changing. You have to realize, okay, I need to change, because the person that got me from 0 properties to 1 and from 1 to 5, I had to think differently. I had to not be afraid of making a mistake. And you know as well as I do, mistakes are lessons, but at first we think it identifies us, right? And I coach a lot of people, and they say, well, I don't want to do this because I don't want to look bad. And my answer is, do you really think you're that popular? Do you think anyone cares? First of all,
to who?
Nobody even knows. Yeah, nobody knows who you are, number one. And nobody cares that you make a mistake. The only person it's hurting is yourself. So I don't agree with that model, but that's me. So I explained the mental side. How do you go home and tell your wife, I want to get into real estate? How do you have a partnership conversation about, okay, because you and I both know that we've seen partnerships, just blow up and nuclear.
Yeah.
I mean, 70% end up in dissolution or lawsuits, because I feel that a lot of it is that they don't get an alignment in the beginning.
I agree.
They don't have the conversation of, okay, number one, first question, what's the exit? Where are we going with this thing? And what's the date that happens? He may say this is a 6-month play. You may be thinking this is 5 years. Well, that's a misalignment. Next thing is who's spending what time on what? Who is,
that's a big one.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is, how do we divorce? If this doesn't work, how do we split the assets and divorce? Because, you hear it. Oh, we're best friends. We're cousins. We're never going to argue. I'm like, that is exactly the reason you have the conversation when you're calm and everyone's having a nice conversation. If you can't talk about it when things are good, how do you really think it's going to go in the heat of battle when you have to get a $50,000 boiler done and nobody has the cash because you never planned it? So that's what this video course is. So I'm a big believer that I don't teach the tactical side of real estate. Look, you want to know what price per square foot is for Formica or granite? I'm not that guy. If you want to say, should I even buy this house? Is that getting me to my goal? Because many people, they'll and again, I'm sure you're very similar, where people will come up to me and they'll be like, hey, Steve, does this deal make any sense? And they'll put the paper like 3 inches from my face. Like, that makes a difference.
Decide in 1 minute also. Figure it out.
Yeah. Should I buy this? I'm like, I don't know, because I don't know where you're going. This could take you closer to your goal, or it could make you bankrupt. I don't know what your goal is. So I always ask people, does this get you closer to your goal? And they're like, I don't have a goal. Well, that's a bigger problem. And do you have a business plan? Because owning one door, owning 50 doors, it's a business. You've got rules, laws, regulations. Landlords are the highest sued in real estate because they don't treat it like a business.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
It's like, so I asked him, what's the business plan? Oh, I don't have one. Okay, I'm a pilot. So think about this. If I got on the plane tomorrow and I said, hey, Jonathan, you know what? Today, maybe we'll go to Hawaii. Maybe we'll go down to Rio, or maybe we'll go to London. I'm not sure. We're going to throw some fuel on. I'm going to take off and see how I feel. And then we're just going to give it a shot. So wish me luck. You're not going to be feeling very comfortable. When we fly an airplane, right, in which best safety record of anything is airlines, we've got a flight plan. We know our time. We know our fuel. We know the weather. We know every down to a detail what we're doing to ensure our successful end destination. When I ask people that have real estate, similar question, they're like looking at me like I'm speaking French with 3 heads. And I'm like, do you understand this is why you're going to fail? Like, you will fail and you will lose everything if you don't think about this first. Because what I've learned is motivation is a great starter. It's great to get you off the blocks and running in the sprint, but it's like a battery. It will drain over time to nothing. The why that you're doing something is what keeps us going on those dark nights when we're laying our head on the pillow and we're going, man, I don't know if this is going to work, right? But the why is what keeps you going. And look, I've gone through hurricanes. I've gone through tornadoes. I've gone through everything, fires of my houses. And it's that why that kept me going, because I was furloughed and I know what it's like to not have that. And so so going back to your question, the masterminds and everything I do, it's showing people that, look, you've got to become that successful person. The people that you and I am today, everybody watching this show, we are at a buoyancy level. We're good. We're pretty good with our weight. We're good with our relationships. We're good with our finances. To here, if we want to be better, we have to do something different. We have to hang around different people. We have to read a new book. We have to think differently. If we don't stay the same. We get worse. I show people that if you don't make a conscious effort every single day, like when you and I wake up in the morning, we make a decision. I am either going to be better or I'm going to be worse than yesterday. It's a simple decision, but that decision has a very large ripple effect. And so that's what I show people. I don't show you how to buy a square foot. They say, I'm going to flip. My question is explain to me and defend your position as to why you are telling me you flip properties and how does this get you to your goal?
This is fantastic. I'm a big mindset person and a mindfulness person. And when it comes to real estate investing, this stuff is like the building blocks to future success, like you're saying. And I think if more people really have to, if you're listening to this now, replay this entire thing again, because what you just said in the last 5 minutes is so important, because everything is focused on like one thing that's right in front of you. But your planning starts way before. It's like people who are clarified as an overnight success. That's not a real thing. Those people are working for years, 10,000 hours, a tipping point to get to the point where they became a quote overnight success. And those of us who've gotten there just know, like you said, when I wake up, I'm thinking about real estate. That's what I like.
One of the things, Jonathan, I'll say is one of my mentors, Brad Sugars, he taught me a term. And I don't even know if it was him or he got it from someone else, borrowed it or whatever. But the term is called B times do equals have. BE times multiplication, do equals have. And he goes, Steve, everybody says, Brad, how do I have this life? How do I have this multi-million-dollar life that you have? I will do whatever it takes. I will work 25 hours in a day if that's what it takes, because as entrepreneurs, we're not afraid of putting in work and getting dirty and doing what we have to do. He said, but you're missing the first part. You have to become a successful person that does successful things to have a successful life. He said, if you are a broke person or a poor-minded person, you are going to do broke and poor-minded things, which means you're going to have a broke and poor-minded life. He goes, it starts with who you have to become. He said, you have to be that person first. You have to, like, when you go down to sleep at night, when you lay down, you have to act like you're asleep at first to go to sleep. If you want to build a $50 million business, and I coach people that are up at this levels, I tell them, are you becoming a $50 million CEO? Because if you are a $5 million CEO, you're not going to get the business to 50 million. You're not going to on the weekends, during commercial, go ahead and become a $50 million CEO. It's not going to happen by accident. You have to become that person. And that always stuck with me. And I always remember that. And I always pay that forward to other people.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think that, and I think it goes to something else that you said. It's being around people who are at the level that you want to get to, because you can't really get into the dialogues of what they're talking about until you're around them enough. And it is like you said, you can be motivated to get into that, but you're not going to have the bandwidth and the knowledge to go. I think that what you're saying is, like, to me, personal growth is so important in whatever you want to do. If you want to build a business, you have to build yourself up first, because if you're not feeling great about yourself, how are you going to be of any help in business to other people? You're not going to make the right decisions because you're not going to be as confident. Even in business, you can have a great business, but if you're not confident with yourself, you're still going to make worse decisions. I mean, this is like really the backbone to what people can think of. It's not just learning about real estate investing. The books and stuff help, but your mindset really has to be in place to get there over the years.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say that being successful in real estate is probably 90% strategic mentally, and it's probably maybe 8 or 7% tactics, and it's 3% by luck, right? It's just by, but look, if you look at any professional out there, any professional athlete, right? They are practicing and visualizing everything. Visualization is huge. I know guys that are pro bodybuilders and they visualize hoisting the trophy up over their heads. I know professional athletes and they visualize making that final leap into the end zone. How many professional, quote unquote, real estate people actually visualize what their life's going to be like and how they're going to get there? They don't, because a lot of times we think that just being busy is going to be successful, but we all know that people that are busy are not successful. I mean, if that was the case, construction workers and day laborers would be the most successful people on the planet. They're not. So it's a lie that we tell ourselves. Instead of slowing down, sitting down, and planning it out, We think I got to get up and I just got to hit the ground running. And look, I do that too. I'm guilty of that as well. But there's something that pulls me back that says, you know what? Hold on. Let's just slow this down and let's think this through first. Even being a pilot, we have to do what's called chair flying, where we're sitting in a chair and we're flipping switches. There's nothing in front of us, but we're visualizing everything going on. Because when we take off on the runway and this plane weighs 770,000 pounds with 380 people on board, and we have an engine lose and catch on fire, do you want me going, what was that thing again? What, do you guys remember? You don't want that. You're assuming we know what we're doing because we practice and we visualize it. Why wouldn't you do that in your real estate? That's your life. That's your career. That, look, negotiating with a contractor, I'm not saying is life or death, but I would say it's a little different than me having an engine on fire at 30,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean. Why wouldn't you do it the way we do it? We have a proven track record. It's practice, it's visualization, and it's knowing the destination.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you're talking about a full spectrum of practice. I think a lot of people get into investing and all they do is crunch numbers all day. They don't look at properties. They're just like, oh, I ran 100 properties through my spreadsheet. And I'm like, great, how many properties have you seen? They always say 0, and they have the mental game's not there. And that's why analysis paralysis is so, popular in the real estate investing world, because they're not having a well-rounded experience like you're talking about, working on themselves, networking, building relationships, learning through books, and then also going out in the field and seeing what it's like. If you want to buy apartments, like, you need to go look at apartments to understand, like you said, what is the upkeep going to be, as what someone, we were joking before, what someone thinks is passive investing to own a 100-unit apartment complex. If you want to find out the least passive thing, buy a big apartment complex and try to manage it yourself in a lower income area. Like, your phone will explode. So
will your head.
Yeah. But this is great stuff. I'm really, really excited for people to hear this, because it's really a different view. And I created this to be more mindful. And this is like right in the alley. So I really appreciate it. Let me grab some of our questions from our pre-call here. These are going to be great. I've gone through these. I'll give you a little reminder. You said greatest influence in real estate. You said Bob Kiyosaki. Was it from the book, or was there more after that?
No, it wasn't just that book. It was his whole slew of books. And I've met him and some of the other people back in the day, and been associated with certain people. But they think differently. It's, again, they have 24 hours like you do and I do. They don't do anything different, but they think differently, so they live their life differently. And I've noticed that, they don't let the outside world influence them. They like that pressure. It's like they become diamonds by that pressure. They don't crumble. And so to me, I just thought that was so interesting. It's such a mental side. It's not the physical side at all. And that was it just clicked with me so much.
Yeah, and if you think of all of what we've talked about in the mindset, and then go back to Rich Dad Poor Dad and think of the part where he kept trying to resist because he's like, oh, this guy's being rude. I don't want to work for, a quarter. But he kept fighting through it because he knew somewhere inside, I'm going to learn. Just like when you said, I'm going to do the 10,000, I'm going to do what he says. Like in Rich Dad Poor Dad, he starts doing what he says, and then he's like, oh shit, this actually works.
Yeah, and look, it's not rocket science, right? Real estate, it's. I think people want to overcomplicate it so they can say why they're not doing it, or they can sit there and crunch numbers. It's like, dude, just get out the door. Just freaking real quick. One of the things that after 9/11 and COVID happened, and so the airlines were in a very similar situation where when COVID happened, airlines were parked, airplanes were parked, and the airline that I work for currently. They were losing about $100 million a day in revenue when their planes were parked, just to put it in perspective.
Yeah.
And so all these podcast people wanted to interview me because I went through 9/11 and then I'm going through COVID. And they said, what's the difference between you then and you now? And I said, it's one word: action. I took massive action. I did not let anything stop me. And you know what? A lot of it was wrong. I made a lot of mistakes, but those mistakes made me a multimillionaire because I was not afraid to make them. And I wasn't afraid to look stupid. I didn't care. I just took action. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I learned from all these books and Kiyosaki. It really boils down to thinking differently and just not getting in your own head and just taking action.
Yeah, I think it relates to what we said before, because if you're consistently taking action and you're okay with making mistakes and considering that, oh, that was just a learning lesson, that's a different mindset from what you said of someone who they do bad on their first flip, or they think making $5,000 is bad. I'm like, well, it's better than zero. And if I break even, it's like, at least I get the down payment back. Even if I lose money, wow, I'm not going to do that again. You can figure it out. That's a mindset thing too, like you said before.
It's just the story they tell themselves. If I were to say, hey, plan to lose $20,000 on your first flip, and you do it and you're like, I broke even. You're like, holy crap, I broke even. That's great. It's all perspective. It's what you let in your head, right? I mean, look, you can go to college and you can spend $100,000 in college. It doesn't make you any money. We all know we know the story. So you won't spend $10,000 to learn how to actually do this that works.
Right.
It's a huge disconnect.
Yeah, I completely agree. Here's two that are tied together. Most important trait for a real estate investor to have. You said focus. We talked about that a lot, but also what is wrong with the real estate investing world now? Lack of focus and then wanting immediate gratification. These are all tied together. We really covered focus a lot, but what do you think people are so interested in the immediate gratification? Is it just the access to money and less work?
I number one, I think it's ego and it's pride. I think those are the two success inhibitors out there, because they want to be able to tell everyone what they're doing, right? Nobody works in silence anymore. It's very rare that somebody who's successful isn't on the radar at some level, right? Everybody wants to be that next, Grant Cardone, Ed Milet, any of these guys, right? But I do think also a lot of these people, laziness and being greedy is one of the worst things you could do. They're lazy, meaning they don't put in the work, right? Or they're greedy and they want all this money and they don't realize it, right? So, I talked to people last, 1 or 2 years, and they're telling me how, they're trying to pitch me on them creating a fund. And I'm like, really? I'm like, so I start asking them questions. They have no idea. And I'm like, don't you think you should look, they could maybe be the smartest people on earth. I don't know. But I'm like, don't you think you should educate yourself a little bit more about being able to answer these questions? And I'm like, they look at me like I'm speaking bear. They're just like, how dare you? Like, I've been doing this for 2 years, man. I've got an Airbnb and a long-term rental. Like, I'm creating a fund. I'm like, okay, do you. Like, that's cool. But so again, that's being lazy and being greedy. And I think that's the biggest problem. One of the challenges in real estate, one of the great things in real estate is there's no rules, right? If you, like we said, we could look at a deal and we can go, you know what? Based on my knowledge, I'm going to do a wrap or a subject to, or I'm going to flip it. The problem with real estate is there's no rules. Yeah. And there's no one to tell you, don't do that. Get an inspection because there's a foundation under there that's going to cost you 50 grand. There's no one there to tell you that. So what happens? The laziness and the greediness seeps in, and, Murphy's Law, like a wrecking ball. And I've been on the backside of a wrecking ball a few times in real estate, and it is not pretty, and it will come and it does not discriminate, and it will clean your clock. And so I think that's the challenge with real estate. Low barrier to entry is good, but low barrier to entry is not good.
Yeah, I agree with the no rules. And one thing when I think about no rules for real estate investing, I always think is insider trading is okay in real estate. The more info that you can get from other people about properties, areas, the better you can do it. But if you're not willing to build the relationships in there and be in those masterminds, you're going to know nothing. Because it's like, like when if you're on a wholesaler's list and it comes out in email, everyone's like, hey, I just got a good deal. I'm like, no. If you got the email, it's already gone through the people they know, then the VIP list, and then to you. You're just taking what's third. All the good properties are gone because you're not in there building the relationships. Great. One way we could collectively make the real estate world, investing world better. This we've talked about a lot, and this is really what you're doing, teaching investors to focus on education and creating an end goal. Do you do that? What's the mastermind portion of what you're doing now? Are those groups that are helping people work together? Because we've been successful at those as well, and I think that's like a camaraderie mechanism that I think is so huge for real estate investors.
Yeah, I think, look, at the end of the day, as real estate investors, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we are a small bit of the community, right? We're kind of bucking the norm per se. And there's not a lot of us, and there's not a lot of information out there that's real and that's relevant. So I think that life is all about chapters, and the first half of your life, those chapters are building and doing and figuring it out. And then you get to a point in life where you're like, okay, I've made enough money. I'm good. I do pretty well as an airline pilot. I do pretty well in real estate. I do pretty well coaching. I'm okay. So I've got all this information. I have all this knowledge. So why not give it back? Why not give back? Right. I think one of the challenges we all have as entrepreneurs is we are very selfish people. And hear me out when I say this is we watch these podcasts. We go to bigger pockets. We do all these things, and we do it for the ones that we love, our family members. But we never actually share what we're doing with them. That's being selfish. So my son, he bought his first rental property at 14 years old, right?
Awesome.
And I wish I could say I designed that. I did not. I to complete honesty, he saw what I was doing, and he was like, I want to own a rental, and I helped him, and he ended up buying one. And I thought to myself, that was the moment I thought, like, wow, like, how selfish have I been? Like, I've got all this knowledge, and I never even really talked to him about it. And because I just assumed he wasn't interested.
Yeah.
But the whole time he had been listening to me going like, Dad, I want to buy a rental. So go ahead. No, I just think so being selfless. So this is my way of being selfless. So I have a community of real estate investors and business people, because I think we're all the same. I think look, when you own real estate, you're going to learn a lot from a guy who's running a $30 million company. And you know what? They want to know about real estate, and you should want to know about business. So I have a community. I have a mastermind. It meets every 2 weeks. It's a Zoom, and we talk about all things real estate, all things business. I don't think that there's walls dividing it. And I think the more you think you're special, the more you think you're isolated. Again, like being an airline pilot, that is not the path to go. I think it's a life of abundance and sharing knowledge and sharing information, as opposed to hoarding it and being selfish.
I agree. I feel like everyone always thinks, I mean, like, what secrets am I really giving away? I'm just telling people what I do. You can only replicate what those of us do if you have the ability to actually take action, like you said. I can give someone my whole playbook. 99% of the people just aren't going to do it because it's too hard for them. One interesting thing that you said, though, about your son, and my kids are 21 and 19. I'm trying to get them, to get their first properties now. But growing up, for me, I rode in the car with my dad. My dad was an investor, and we literally would go to yard sales. He made an offer on every single house at every yard sale. And as a kid, I think he was intentionally trying to teach me. I was resistant. And then at like 19, I was like, wait a minute. I know a lot of stuff. Like, this is interesting. And I still use things that he taught me every day now, just from those times. So that, like you say, sharing with people that we know and people that we don't know is going to create huge ripple effects on what they can do long term that we may never know about, but it's just good karma all around to help people. As we close in here, this is a great one. Best book you've read that influenced your career in real estate, 10X by Grant Cardone. Tell us how. I mean, that book is obviously really about 10Xing your business. Did you use it to do that to yours?
I did. It really helped me. And I've, through growing and being associated with people like him and other Brad Lees and stuff, I really realized that I was the limiter on my life because of my beliefs. I thought our business can do X per year, but you're like, well, why couldn't it do 10X? You don't have to work 10 times harder. If you work on a deal, if you work on a house, you're going to spend so many hours in the day working on this house to buy a deal. You're going to spend probably the same amount of hours working on a 300 unit, 400 unit apartment complex. It's the same amount of hours. You're going to be thinking differently, but you're going to be thinking bigger. Now, I carried that through with everything in life. I started, one of my things is, having affirmations, right, of who I want to become. And one of those was I'm a world renowned speaker. I've done 3 tours speaking around Australia. I speak all over the United States. So all of a sudden, like, these things happen because I started thinking bigger. I, without even realizing it, was putting a governor on myself and a limit on myself. And again, when I would tell people, like, I'm going to go speak around the world, and people are like, I don't see it. Like, I don't either, but it's happening. And I just kept saying it. And next thing I know, and again, I got that from 10X. All these successful people talk about visualizing, talk about your reticular activating system. I just think it's so important to just release any of these inhibitions that we put on ourselves, or that people tell us, oh, that's good, Steve, but you'll never do that. You know how many people tell me I should slow down? They're like, Steve, you should take it easy, slow down. But yet they're behind me And they're telling me what I should do. They've never done it. They've never sold a business. They've never spoken around the world, but yet they're telling me what I should do with my life. And I'm like, look, and I'm very respectful and I get it. And some people may do it because they care about me. Others may be doing it because they just don't want me to see me succeed anymore. I don't know, but I don't care. I really don't care. Like I appreciate that and I'm respectful, but I don't care. Like I'm not listening. I'm doing what I do because I love doing it. And 10X really helped me get through those things of the haters. You know, they say first they encourage you, then they try to calm you down and slow you down. Then they ridicule you and eventually they admire you.
Yeah,
and
they want to slow you down because you passed them and they didn't want to work that hard. I mean, and it's a common thing, and it does happen in the investing world a lot because you know, if you're being honest, like real estate investing a lot is about like money, and people don't like to talk about money. I don't think it's all about the money, but people want to know for verification, like you've made X or this cash flows this. I think those numbers are important to people, but also, like you said, ego can get in the way of a lot of this along the way.
It does. And look, you know, I'm good friends with, you know, a lot of people that I'm sure you are as well, Brandon Turner and these other guys. None of us really worry about money. That's an ego, right? If I talk to Brandon and I know, you know, he's very, very successful guy and everything, he'll tell me what he's doing. He won't flaunt it, but if I ask him, he'll tell me. Because it's a way for me to learn, like, wow, how'd you do that? And so people that are successful, they don't hide it because it's not a badge of shame. It's not necessarily a badge of courage, but it's a barometer. It's a key performance indicator of your finances. And so I think as kids, as children, you and I are about the same age, you didn't really talk about money with your parents. It was kind of forbidden because that was an ego thing. Now people that are successful, they don't aspire, they don't adhere to the same rules. And they're making a lot different revenue sides. So again, everybody has their own reason why or why not. I'm not a psychologist. I don't judge people, but I don't really care what they think because it doesn't affect me at all.
I mean, that's one of the most important things that you've said throughout is that not caring about what others think and not caring about what they think. If you're going to do an investment, it doesn't go that well. Okay. So you're going to get some criticism, take it, figure out what you're going to do from it, and then be stronger the next time. So now, if you could give just one piece of advice to new real estate investors right now, I mean, if you just boil down all the things that you've learned over the last 20 years, one thing like in this current climate, though, what would be one piece of advice that you would give to real estate investors like right now? The climate's different.
Yeah, I would say focus on your end goal before you buy anything. Make sure you understand what it is you want, when you want it to happen. Have a goal. That has to be a date, an amount, a time, and a way to get there. Create that first. Take the time. Like really, if you're married, what does my life look like as a result of owning all this real estate? When does that date happen? What are we going to do with it? And so one of the things that I will say, and the reason I'm going to go on a quick tangent here, but you know, a lot of times when I talk to real estate investors or business people, I'll say, why are you doing this? And they will give me about a 5-minute dissertation of what they don't want in life. I don't want a 9 to 5. I don't want to be controlled. I don't want this. I don't want that. It's all what they don't want. Well, we all know that when you focus on what you don't want, your brain goes right back to it. And that's what you end up with. And so I'll ask them, well, how's that working for you? It's not. It's everything what I don't want. Interesting. So I'll ask them, okay, my question was, what do you want? Not what you don't want. Let's try this again.
Big difference.
And it's a big difference. And a lot of times they'll sit there and like, you know what? I don't know. Like, I don't know. And so what happens is there's so many people that are running away from the life that they don't want. They don't even know where they're running to. It's like they're just running down the street at full speed, but they don't know where they're running to. So before you run out of the house, have a destination, know where you're running to. And what happens a lot of times when we do this as entrepreneurs, we say, this is what we tell ourselves and we tell people, I want freedom. And I'm like, freedom from what? They're like, I want freedom to do whatever I want to do. Well, you could sell all of your shit tomorrow and you can go live in the park in your car and you'd have all the freedom that you want. But what you don't want is the memories that freedom creates. So I tell people, don't buy freedom. Use the money from real estate to buy you freedom, to buy the memories. Take it one more step. What memories do you want to buy? In the beginning of the year, ask yourself, okay, what memories, family, do we want to create? Well, we want to go to Africa and go on safari. I want to see the Rolling Stones in Wembley Stadium. that's the memory I want. The money gives you the freedom. What is freedom? I mean, that's so ambiguous. You can't even quantify that.
We're all free, technically right now. So it's, what do you really want to? I love it though, because I think that goes back to the affirmations also that you were saying before. If you're envisioning what you want as a family or as a company for the next year, then you have to visualize it and put it down on paper so you know. Because once you have the end goal, I'm sure that you train this. When you have the end goal, then you can build all the building blocks and boil it down to what do you need to do today so that in 365 days I'm there. And if you do it that way, you always get to the goal in like half the time because you're regimented in the process, right? And that's like the way to do it. And that means you can 10x because you keep doing it in half the time because you have a system set up.
Yeah. And so going back to what you're asking about what I do. So I do a very high level mastermind. I do a 3-level mastermind in a mansion. It's very exclusive. It's 10 to maybe 15 people that come in for 3 days, and we basically break down their life and rebuild it. But I bring in, I brought in the last one I just did was I brought in Bradley. He was a speaker, spoke for 3 hours to everybody. I brought in the Iron Cowboy who has 2 Guinness records of Ironmans. Yeah. And then I brought in a guy named Kevin Elko, who is the mindset coach for Nick Saban. So these are people that are very, very successful. They're very, very different successes.
Yeah.
But it's the mental. And not one of them talked about, well, Brad talked about business, about his 8-figure businesses, but a lot of them, they talk about who you have to become. Like how did the Iron Cowboy do 50 triathlons in 50 days in 50 states? Those, yeah. But it's the mental side of it. He's like 1 foot after the other. That's all I did. And so that's at these masterminds. That's what I do. And people leave there and they're like, holy crap. Like, it's like I've just got an oil change of my life and I'm reset. And so that's what I do for people. And it's really been successful. And to me, it makes me feel good because I have people that come back a few times and they're like, this has been like something that I need to have. And so I feel good. Like I'm actually doing good for people and they're getting tangible results. Not just, yes, they're getting financial results, but they're becoming different people. And to me, that's what this is about.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious. People can watch the video, listen to the podcast, that you actually care. In the real estate investing world, there's just so many things that people can get into that I always look at and I'm like, that seems like bullshit. But like exactly. you care, and you can tell when somebody really cares because you're invested in the people. And if the people do well, then it feels good for you. So where is the best place to get in touch with you is at your website, Steve Rozenberg. That's Rozenberg with a Z.com.
Yeah, it's ROZENBERG. They can also, if they reach out to me on social media, I am the one who actually answers.
Me too, still.
Yeah. If you follow me on Instagram, I travel the world flying, so you'll see all the cool places. I was just in Tokyo and Hawaii last week. But they can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I've got YouTube videos. I have a podcast called High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg. I'm everywhere. I try to be omnipresent. I try to be out there. And again, it's a way to pay it back. It's a way to give back to people to make sure that we're all doing our part. As I think, somebody gave this to me, so I give it back as much as I can.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we'll link to everything in the show notes. I really appreciate you spending the time with me. I learned a lot. This is a really enlightening episode for me. I love mindset stuff, and you really crushed it. So thanks so much for being here. I'm glad we got connected, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you. It was good having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Steve. This has been episode 22 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Steve Rozenberg. We'll see you next week.